Welcome to Cooncast, a purposefully divisive name for an equally divisive subject matter, where we'll cover raccoons and exotic pet ownership. To recap what happened in Leon's life, but since he's not coming till May, maybe June, don't know when, but around that time, I'll be supplementing it with topics. So the first topic we'll cover is exotic pet ownership. Next week, I don't know. I was going to do raccoon ownership, but I think being autism awareness, I might double up and cover an autism topic because I suffer from Asperger's. How this will work is these episodes don't have a set time limit or time goal. Some will last 5 minutes, some will last 20 to 30 minutes. It just depends on the subject matter and how much content I have for that subject matter. Today's going to be a long one due to the fact that it's a very important subject to cover and something that constantly gets brought up due to the nature of the topic, exotic pet ownership. With that said, these are my opinions. I may use harsh language, and sometimes the subject matter may be considered controversial. So just keep that in mind. These are my opinions. In this episode, we'll be covering exotic pet ownership and the ethics behind it. It's a very volatile subject matter. A lot of people are anti-pets, period, especially when they involve exotics. Now, I'll try to justify my reasoning behind things to the best of my ability, but some people can't be sated. If it's not obvious, obviously I'm for it, but I'm not irrational. I know that it's not as easy as being pro or against exotic pet ownership. The first part will cover my personal rules I use to determine what an appropriate exotic animal is to own. Now, it's based on many factors: financial reasons, health reasons, habitat size, personal comfort zone, and safety. First, let's cover things I'm against owning, and the justification for these may sound cold and cruel, but they're just my own personal opinions on the matter. To me, anything bigger than a wolf starts becoming unmanageable on a one-man basis, I guess is the way you would say it. Which, I mean, if the worst case scenario happens and the wolf lunges and attacks someone, you can, in theory, handle the wolf and subdue it before it does serious damage or cause death. Another reason I say wolves is because once you get to anything bigger than a wolf, they need a lot of special requirements, which they have a larger diet, they need a bigger habitat, they need a lot of attention, and if anything happens to them, they cost a lot to take care of. Now, since my company will be more of a sanctuary instead of a full-blown zoo, we couldn't properly provide for them. What I mean by class is we are in the class Mammalia, or mammals. Personally, anything below class bird, which are your reptiles, your fish, your arthropods, also known as insects, bugs, spiders, crustacean, cephalopods, and so on, I wouldn't consider keeping. Partially the reason is a lot of those animals carry something called venom. They make them really risky pets to own. Another reason is a lot of those pets are confined to a really small tank. You can't really interact with them, you can't play with them, you can't really make them feel like part of the family. Some will argue against that, but that's my personal feelings on the matter. I'm extremely against owning wild slash feral animals. Now, what I mean by that is these are animals that were born in the wild and for whatever reason they've been orphaned. The problem with owning those animals is most of the time it's highly illegal. Two, they make really unpredictable pets due to the fact that they're still extremely attached to their wild instincts. Now, Leon, in my case, is 30 generations removed from the wild. He's captive bred. The breeders I'm buying from have a whole system in place to really retard their wild instincts. Another issue with rescuing abandoned wild animals is that once those animals hit maturity, people give up on them and they just abandon them. And the reality is, most of the time, when you give up that animal to a law enforcement agency, they put the animal down because it's really hard to place wild rescued animals due to the fact that most sanctuaries that also are rehab centers are full and they don't have room, and sanctuaries are really rare. It becomes more ethical to euthanize the animal than throwing it back in the wild where it's just going to die within a day anyways. If you see a wild animal, a wild kit, a wild pup, a wild whatever, leave it alone. The best thing you can do is call the local authority and they'll take care of the animal. The last point I want to cover in this subsection is exotic pets and children. Exotic pets and small children don't always mix. Safe rule of thumb is wait until the children get older and they can understand how to interact with the exotic animal, or wait until the children leave the house and they're adults. The reason is exotics require a lot of attention, and if you don't give them the proper amount of attention that they require, they can become destructive, aggressive, and just a handful. The first one being exotics are a challenge, and as such, if you're willing to meet that challenge, then it can be quite rewarding too. It takes a lot of intelligence and time. In most cases, especially in carnivores of the class mammal, they tend to have a life expectancy of 10 to 15 years. So you have to be willing to devote 10 to 15 years of your life to take care of that animal. And usually that means that you're giving up your life, sometimes, sadly, literally, to look after this animal. Because it's hard to find someone to take care of the animal, and once they bond with you, they tend to be overly protective of you and can be aggressive to other people. The second one is a more personal reason, and not a lot of people can relate to, but it's the best way to promote conservation of animals is by having a physical representation of the thing you're trying to save and educate people on, because it puts a face to the cause. Let's go into the actual heart of this episode and talk about the ramifications and requirements of owning an exotic animal. The first thing you need to do is check see if the animal is actually illegal in your state. After that, I would definitely recommend checking out your local vets and see what animals they do or don't take care of. Because even if they bill themselves as exotic vets, they may not take care of wild carnivores due to the fact that it requires an additional license in most states. We're going to get back to the topic of legality because There's a lot of different things that goes with it. First of all, I briefly touched on different states have different rules and restrictions when it comes to exotic pet ownerships. And those rules and restrictions can come in the form of permits and the mandatory need to purchase liability insurance. Now, liability insurance is pretty much insurance to protect you if you get sued, if the animal bites someone, or any false accusations that can come from it. Think of it a lot like health insurance. Different animals are considered different levels of risk. And with that said, the higher the risk, the more money it costs to get the same amount of coverage than it would for an animal of lower risk. In my case, when I did the homework and when I got quoted, I think they said it would cost me $1,000 a year for $100,000 worth of coverage. So here's the harsh reality of it all is it's easier to lose your animal than it is to keep your animal due to the fact that you're going to deal with prejudice. People have certain mindsets that X makes a pet and Y does not make a pet. And if you have a pet that falls into category Y, then people in category X may feel threatened by your pet, especially if it really depends on the animal. Like if it's a wolf, people will be more likely to falsely report you due to the fact that they feel like they're inherently at risk because of the animal you keep, no matter how well you keep the animal and how many cages you put it behind. So keep that in mind. There's a lot of false accusations, and the reality is cops tend to side with the accuser than with the animal owner for safety reasons. As cruel as that may seem, that means that there's another huge issue that goes with that. And even if your animal has all the right shots, be it rabies, distemper, parvo, whatever, it doesn't mean that the law will recognize those shots, no matter how much paperwork you have proving that you have been up to date with your shots. So, if your animal is accused of being a part of a crime, then they may put down your animal and test it for rabies, even though you have paperwork from a licensed vet saying that it's up to date on its rabies vaccination. The single and most important thing that you carnivore lovers need to take into consideration before you get your exotic animal is that these animals are not cats, nor are they dogs, so don't expect them to act like their domesticated counterparts. Let's use a common domesticated dog as an example. Now, dogs have been domesticated for about 15 to 20,000 years, and it took man about 20 to 30,000 years to domesticate the Eurasian wolf, or Canis lupus lupus. During that time, the dog's genetic makeup was literally being changed, and that's why dogs are called Canis lupus familiaris, because they evolved into a different subspecies of wolf. Wolves have been on this planet for about 300, 400,000 years. But let's take an animal like, oh, I don't know, the raccoon. They've been on this planet in their current form for the past 30 to 40 million years. So that's a lot of wild that you have to overcome and try to control. One common thing that kept on coming up in my research is that a lot of breeders have told people who are looking to buy wild animals to never buy them in pairs, due to the fact that an animal will naturally bond with its own over something different like a human being, and that can cause issues to inexperienced owners. The final point in this section that I would like to cover is the fact that these animals take a lot of time. If you can't take care of the animal, then don't get it. Because these are all consuming animals. They require a lot of attention and they require you to be constantly on your game in order to make sure their wild instincts and desires don't make themselves known. What does it take to domesticate an animal? There are many factors, and from what I found, there's something that I call the 3 S's that you need to maintain as a wild animal owner. The animal has to feel safe. Now, there's different ways you can go about doing that. A great way is getting the animal at a young age so that it creates a bond with you and associates you as its parent. The next S would then be sustenance, or making sure that your animal's well fed, because a hungry animal will always look for food, and it may do it in a rather destructive manner. Also, a hungry animal tends to be easily agitated and may accidentally lash out if not properly fed. Then the final S would be stimulation, making sure that the animal is properly stimulated, be it with toys or actual human interaction time, because a bored animal will look for entertainment. And again, it can do that in a rather destructive manner. Not properly stimulated animals can become neurotic. They start rocking and they start doing weird behaviors that humans may find cute, but is a sign of things aren't all right. They can either start pacing back and forth or other weird repetitive movements due to the fact that they haven't been properly stimulated for enough time and they don't know how to sate that curiosity and that need for attention and entertainment. Outside of those 3 S's that you as the owner have to constantly maintain and monitor, there are other things that can contribute to a more easily domesticated animal, such as how many generations away from the wild has it been in captivity and been captively bred. While looking on YouTube and watching a lot of animal videos, a common misconception I hear and have come across from animal activists is that they think that the animals in sanctuaries are wild animals ripped from their habitat and forced to be kept in captivity. That's not the case. What usually happens is sanctuaries trade their animals with other sanctuaries to constantly keep their bloodlines pure and prevent inbreeding. So let's cover how rehabs work in a very crude sense. So, rehabilitators take in animals that state authorities give them or concerned citizens give them and try to rehab them to be ready to be re-released in the wild. One thing to note, though, is sanctuary license usually fall under the USDA exhibitor's license in the States. Rehab license are extremely separate from sanctuary license. And that's why most places are either strictly sanctuaries or strictly rehabilitation centers. And rarely both, due to the fact that it takes up a lot of land and it can cause a lot of problems. Now, if it's a sanctuary slash rehab center, usually what happens is they have 2 very separate areas of that facility so that the captive bred animals are not mixing with the wild bred animals, due to the fact that a lot of times wild bred animals may have parasites and different kinds of diseases that they're fighting that the owners don't want contaminating the captive stock. Also, in those cases, human interaction with the wild animal is kept at a minimum, and a lot of times, when interacting with the animals, they wear gloves, so animals have an easier time during release that they haven't bonded with their human caretaker during that time of the rehabilitation. There's three different levels and or classes of licenses that the USDA gives out. Class 3 is your basic zoo license or just basic exhibitor's license with not really the intention of selling the animal but just displaying them. After Class 3, or sometimes called Class C, there's something called a Class B or Class 2 license where now you're starting to get into the selling aspect of it. And that kind of is a theme. It allows you, the further you go along, up to Class A, it just changes the level of are you selling the animal or exhibiting it? Where Class A is pretty much strictly selling the animal. But Class B is like a very nice, happy middle ground. As I said, it was kind of admittedly a shit and really rough description of how sanctuaries are ran and how the USDA license system works. Next time, I think we'll be talking about raccoon ownership, or it might be an autism topic due to the fact that April, again, is Autism Awareness Month, and as someone who suffers from Asperger's, it's kind of a personal topic.